I know everyone in the entertainment industry is challenged in new ways by the emergence of new platforms, new technologies. I won't start the AI bingo from the get-go here, but I think that our plan today is that we're going to have a conversation here, and we have a light structure to it, but we'll also open up the floor for questions at the end. So certainly keep in mind that as we continue the conversation. So with that in mind, starting off, Barry.
Wow. Is this thing on?
Yes, I think so. Is it? Yeah, we're good with the audio. I'd love to just hear, you're at Condé Nast and in a really unique position where you have an incredible history of rich storytelling from a pretty classical place. And at the same time, you're also embracing and really setting the stage and the pace for so many new original formats that are sort of like endlessly copycatted by so many others. So how do you manage thinking through the sort of traditional journalism and editorial and sort of unique perspective that most of your firm has, a history in, with all the emerging opportunities on social media platforms?
Firstly, thanks for the question, and secondly, thanks for having me. Look, for us, we're like a legacy brand. We've been around for 100+ years, and so we come with like a ton of history, and we come with a ton of like richness and legacy, and kind of like we're very aspirational. Like you think of like Vogue or a GQ, and like for those that don't know who Condé Nast is, like we have underneath our umbrella we have like Vogue and GQ, Vanity Fair, etc. But like we have a ton of prestige, but like what we've had to do is almost like break down the wall between editorial and social, and make our content, basically move with the times and make our content like so super relatable and super accessible. Like people sort of super relatable, so that people actually want to watch it, and there isn't like a kind of barrier up, and it feels aspirational and yet kind of accessible. And so that's kind of what we've leaned into with our storytelling. And then just when I talk about breaking down the wall, previously we would do a story on Vogue, or, for example, and then we would do like shoulder content with that story, on our socials. But now it's very much like it's our social, 70 questions or 10 essentials or our TikTok. They're becoming the story. Like those are becoming the story, and they're almost like influencing our publishing. So like it's become like a very symbiotic kind of like fluid relationship.
I love that. So transitioning from sort of a social media in the margins to taking more of a center stage.
100%, yeah.
Makes sense. And kudos to all the iconic formats that you've birthed. Ziad, I'd love to hear from your perspective at UTA. You obviously, built your own agency. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background from an entrepreneurial perspective. Are now part of this incredible UTA marketing group, and we've been together at many different events, and from Sundance to your own properties in Brooklyn. I'd just love to hear a little bit more about where you sit from helping marketers and brands reach the next generation and thinking about what they need to learn and adapt in order to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being in conversation with me today, my friend. Thrilled to be here. A little bit more about me for some context is, long story short, I started a Gen Z marketing agency around 10 years ago when I was in high school, where we work with brands and clients to help them better understand and connect with diverse young audiences. Been building that business, and then about a year and a half ago, we were acquired by United Talent Agency, and specifically their marketing group, to really help brands connect with the center of culture, as UTA is a company that sits at the epicenter of culture. And to your question, insofar as, what am I really thinking about today as it relates to advising my clients, whether they be in entertainment or otherwise, on where the market is and where it's headed. To the point that was just made, one of the things that I'm obsessed with thinking about right now is that the statistic that only 10 to 20% of people today make 80 to 90% of the content on social media. And what that means is that, to me, scrolling on social media has become actually not that functionally different than going to the movie theater. You are consuming passively somebody's entertainment who's getting paid to make that entertainment. And I think that we don't talk enough about, like, as a society and as an industry, what the transition from friend to follower meant, insofar as how we both consume content, but also how we interact with each other. And my thesis is that social media really no longer exists, therefore. There's actually not much social that's about it. It's really media And social might live in the DMs. Social might live on group chat apps, right? Social might live in places that we're actually not thinking about as social, whereas disproportionately where connection and community is happening. What we're talking to a lot of folks about right now insofar as understanding that is, the takeaway then is, for me, it's all one media landscape. Right? Overcompensating can start as a stand-up show turned digital series turned Amazon Prime Video show turned people are actually watching the whole thing on TikTok. And it's one IP that lives across these permeable boundaries of media. And so thinking about how can editorial, how can traditional, how can social actually live symbiotically together, and thinking about it as how do we tell really impactful stories and build really powerful IP that lives across these territories, as opposed to thinking about them as separable silos, is really what we're pushing and thinking a lot about with our clients right now.
So that's fascinating, and thank you for sort of setting that stage of fluidity between the platforms. And it's a perfect transition too to Mike and I were talking earlier in the green room about the sort of history of independent film in New York and sort of how it's really rapidly evolving. Can you speak to that from like a cinematic perspective, and maybe even just from like what's practical when you're looking at things like microdramas or some of the emerging sort of POV visual storytelling, or even podcasts that are now all on video? Like what's a way in for someone who wants to tell a story? Where do they begin?
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. What's a way in? I mean, I first of all, all right, so you imagine you're an indie filmmaker 10 years ago, and there was a model to sell your indie film, which was you go to Sundance, and a distributor picks you up, you do a theatrical, and maybe you make a streaming or cable deal. All those kind of models are completely broken. So I'm not happy about it per se, the indie filmmaker in me, the guy that owns a soundstage in New York, a creator studio, there's a lot of business. The money didn't go away; it just got dispersed to influencers and stuff like that. So now I teach a class at SVA as well, at Careers in Film, and I'm talking to these young people. And I asked one of them, and I asked the class at large. I said, "How would you feel if you got your movies through like Instagram Reels, and you had to keep swiping to advance the story?" And half the class were excited about that idea. So for me, I think I'm getting pushback from indie filmmakers. Some of them are going to want to be purist. Hey, we got to see it in theater. But the ones that have their eyes open and minds open, I think these micro narratives speak to a future of indie film that could be distributed through short bursts. So I'm taking my legacy IP. I've made 6 features. I'm going to chop them all up, put them on their channels, and drive to Tubi and YouTube and try and convert.
It's fascinating, and I think this, for those of you who are unaware, this is a trend that's been alive and well for many years in China, this microdrama idea, but it's really just starting to sort of hit the U.S. market.
But am I being clear that you could take you could be watching The Godfather someday on Twitter?
Yes, absolutely.
And scrolling from like one story to the next.
People already are.
Or
There's like part 74.
Yeah.
Like I find myself kind of on TikTok sometimes, like it's not filmmaking, but it's like a news story, for example, and it's like part 1, so you watch all of part 1, then you jump into part 2 and part 3, so like the next thing you know, you're there for 3.5 hours, like looking at the same thing.
Yeah, and so then I think what's intriguing about the Chinese microdramas that they shoot at my studio often. The way they release them, they almost kind of keep you with a cliffhanger at the end of every episode. So you're going to want to be there the next day, right? So they're using some conventions like that to keep people coming back.
And we run Lionsgate's TikTok as an agency partner. We help run it. And a piece in Variety just came out about it yesterday about how we've actually worked with them to leverage TikTok fan editors who make these like fan edits of content and splice down this content to actually be a vehicle for Lionsgate to market its films. And so not necessarily looking them at odds with one another, but actually as the same part of the same ecosystem that can supercharge one another. Yeah. Because right now, people are watching part 74 of a TV show or movie on TikTok, but the studio oftentimes isn't actually collaborating with those partners to actually make that marketable, to make any monetization strategy happen around it, where it's just existing in a silo away from it that isn't really actually helping the business. And if we're actually collaborative and think about how can these tools actually be additive to what we're already building, I think there's a ton of possibility.
But it's what's interesting to me about this whole thing is like, Quibi tried to do this, was it 5-10 years ago? They tried to do exactly what's happening, what people are doing now, and yet they failed. And so, like, I'm always intrigued as like why this is so much more successful than pretty much the same model.
Well, I don't think it was the same model, right? Quibi was, the thesis of Quibi was that people wanted 15-minute episodes, which I actually think is like antithetical to I think how a lot of people are consuming media today. You either want to commit to saying, I have 3 hours and I want to watch a movie, or you want to gaslight yourself into being like, I'm only going to scroll for 1 second, and then you find yourself there for 3 hours. I don't, me personally, I'm never you know what, I want to watch a 10-minute YouTube video. I don't have that impulse. I either want to be I'm going to rot in my bed all day today and watch a whole marathon of a TV show, and or gaslight myself into believing I'm just going to scroll for a second. And so I think it was divorced from a legitimate consumer insight, and therefore wasn't successful.
And not to derail this panel completely, but yeah, I think that's what we're seeing. Basically, we sort of at Condé we have a ton of success with our YouTube series, and we mentioned them earlier, 10 Essentials, things like that. But even those, YouTube's obviously the number one platform that everyone goes to when they turn any kind of device on, but people don't have the patience anymore for a 10-minute 10 Essentials or a 10-minute 73 questions. It's literally everything needs to be kind of much more bite-sized and quick now.
But people are watching these video essays and long-form content, but it's often they didn't go in the mindset with I'm going to watch a 2-hour video. Right. It was I'm just going to click around, and then they stuck there, right? Which I think is psychologically pinpointing what is the consumer pain point, what is the opportunity, what is the insight, and innovating around it, as opposed to presupposing that we know better than the consumer. Is I think where Quibi went wrong.
I want to get to Nicholas, but I wanted to know, this is great, and I also just want to add one last point before we switch off this topic, which is at Magnet we're seeing a lot of data in the different sort of viewing patterns, and what's interesting is the duration is actually connected quite intimately to the value proposition that the audience sees in the content. And so if you're looking for something very utilitarian where you're trying to fix your toaster or whatever, people will sit there and watch a 7-minute video repeatedly because they want to actually get to that end game. Whereas if it's something where you're trying to figure out what's the hottest lipstick, and you might have 10 seconds before you dash out the door, pick something up in Sephora and you're watching it on the go, that might be under a minute, a YouTube short. With this in mind, Nicholas, I'm so curious. Please tell us, at Viral Nation here, how virality gets dismissed as fleeting, and I think that you're doing some really fascinating work, building loyal communities and audience development around influencers. So how are you connecting the dots between the agency part of your business, the tech platform, and the influencers?
Yeah, hi everyone, Nicholas here at Viral Nation. So we essentially do two things at Viral Nation. We're a influencer and social marketing agency, and we're a tech and data company. And I think you said it exactly right. The trick is connecting those. What we do on the tech side is we analyze video content at scale with AI. So we're looking for trends. For example, we believe we have 32 content styles internally. So green screen, get ready with me, singing, unboxing. The main ways that social content is displayed and purveyed, and we try to look basically for correlations between those and the talent that we activate. So if we put a cooking creator with a humorous campaign style on a cooking campaign, what do we learn about that for the person we picked, for the activation strategy, for A to Z of how to make that work? So that's a little bit how we connect those sides of the business. And I'll only say for the kind of cultural relevancy, I always think about kind of what it means to be a human being. Humans need to connect. So that's why Facebook has 3 billion people logging in every single day. You could raise a human being on a remote island. They would never see another person, and I genuinely think that's just innate in our DNA, or even if you look at primates. So it's about understanding, in my mind, I think psychology was brought up. What's the psychology? Why is social really, really relevant? And for this conversation, what can you learn about that for film? Or we work a lot in fashion. What do we learn about the fashion industry? And what insights can you bring to push any industry forward?
I appreciate that. And this is a great transition to my next question around talent and representation. And obviously, you came into a family at UTA that represents a lot of legacy talent, and also digital native. Yeah. And so on the creators side versus sort of traditional celebrities, how are people thinking about careers today? I mean, especially when there's so many different not only platforms, but ways to tell stories. You see, people in Hollywood, transitioning to Broadway. That's been a sort of traditional, one foot in each of those acting stages. But from a creator economy perspective, it's like podcasters are now doing their own narrative films, and it does feel like that fluidity must be really confusing from sort of a career strategy perspective. What's
Yeah.
UTA's perspective, and what's your own person's perspective?
So look, right, I run a marketing agency, and so my world was much more sort of marketing and advertising, and then it sort of happened that United Talent Agency acquired us, and I've been thrilled to be there insofar as my theory of change as it relates to marketing and advertising is that for so long the model has been let's interrupt the story as opposed to let's integrate into the story. And I think that the most powerful place that anyone can sit right now is in the position of storytelling. That we have a connection problem, that we have cultural problems, that stories have the capacity to heal, to transform. And I believe in that. And I believe that UTA sits at the center of that insofar as we represent, to your point, traditional talent, but also authors, but also newscasters, but also screenwriters and everything in the middle, right? Of all the ways that someone could tell a story. And I think what you're finding today and what I think we're really interested in is that I think historically there was this notion to stay in your lane. And I think Gen Z has come onto the scene right around Gen Z Marketing Agency and sort of in every category, whether in talent or whether in the workplace or otherwise, said, to hell with these lanes, right? We're gonna chart entirely new paths forward and weave in between the lanes. And this notion of being a multi-hyphenate, I think, is so essential to, I think, how a lot of young people are thinking about their own careers and their own selves. We live in a gig economy, right? We live in a moment where we can have many more identities simultaneous, and where we don't feel like we have to live in an archaic or prefixed, right, menu of options. We get to decide our own. And I think that UTA is really excited about that notion. And I think that's why, I work with talent across the talent ecosystem, whether or not they are represented by UTA in my role specifically, but UTA was first, right, to represent digital and podcasting and gaming talent, because we were excited for our traditional talent about playing in those spaces, but also excited about this new talent and how they can play in the traditional spaces, right? And what we're seeing today is, whether it's the Victoria's Secret show, right, just a few days, last night, was that 2 nights ago, right? The first things that I saw about it were creators being there, and then I'm like, oh, traditional models are there, oh, also actresses are there, right? Like, all of it is one. It's just the zeitgeist. And the zeitgeist doesn't differentiate between is this traditional or is this social. Talent and stories are being told across these platforms. And why talent would want to be represented by a UTA is because you can have a team that represents that whole flywheel and that whole ecosystem of cultural opportunity, whether it's writing or speaking or creating or traditional or whatever it might be. And I think you need that today, because I think that we're living in an attention economy, and the way that you keep someone's attention is by constantly rewriting your own story and telling new ones across mediums. And I think that we're really excited about that, and increasingly all of the talent, right, that we work with and represent are not just playing in one lane, they're playing across lanes really creatively, and I think that's really exciting.
It's excellent.
Let me build on that a little
Yes.
bit. So from our perspective, we manage 400 creators, and I love what you said about hyphenate. Every single one of them, I think, is a hyphenate. So it's kind of finance 101. It's about diversification. So we have athlete-creators, movie stars-creators. A lot of our creators are creator-actress. And I just think people talk about the convergence of media. Like, all the media types, I think, are becoming more and more unified over the years, from billboard to radio to social, and you're seeing an integration there. I think it's the same thing with talent and with creators. A few examples, I don't know if you guys saw the new SNL cast members, but their TikTok presence is insane. I mean, it clearly, and I know other industries that are also kind of like looking at social first when they make these kind of decisions, but I think SNL as an entity is very wise to think about, can these folks reach out on TikTok? SNL is a very, very old institution. It's 50 years. And the only way that any institution that's that old survives is like thinking about the next trend, integrating, innovating. And I think that's one of the ways as social media takes over kind of every single industry. So that's some of what we're seeing.
But it's also just, unless you want to go, sorry. I just jumping off that, I think, like, if the majority of my SNL content I watch, I don't think I've ever watched SNL like on a traditional platform. I constantly just I just watch it on TikTok. That's the only place I see it. Or like the only time I ever see Jimmy Kimmel is basically like, on TikTok. So like, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's just more, it just shows you kind of like where like just how vital social is in like everyone's worlds now, and like how much more present it is. And like, you know, I think it's is it Larry Ellison, isn't it? What's his name? No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's like essentially gonna be buying TikTok.
David.
Yeah, and he's gonna be buying TikTok, but like
Son, yes.
that's gonna give him more reach than like CBS and like 3 other networks put together, and the control of like, you know, the next generation of viewers is insane.
I also want to just quickly add on to what Nick was saying around this notion of hyphenates. I think we need to think about creators not just as creators, but also creatives. And I think like that's the transition that we're seeing, is that most creators have ambitions that create the content is just a way to leapfrog the traditional hierarchies that exist. Yeah. But they ultimately want to be actors or directors or entrepreneurs. What social is a distribution mechanism. It's not the be-all, end-all for most folks. It's just the way that most of us are interacting with content and with stories. But many of us have stories that we want to tell that live offside of that platform. And I think the brands and the folks and the companies that are understanding creators, not just as a distribution mechanism, but actually as creatives who are leveraging a distribution system, are the ones that are really unlocking its full potential.
And I'll just say, as the boots on the ground guy here, because I'm a production services company, a soundstage, we're being approached by talent and creatives that want to white label our services and say they have a studio, they have a production company. We just had Paul Heyman, a big guy in wrestling right now, want to white label all of our studios to say he's now creating his own content. So I think the influencers might have inspired the legacy talent to be like, yeah, you could do this yourself. You don't need to wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder and give you your show. Go make your own show. And obviously, the digital technology now allows things to be done for you don't need the mega studio behind you to make a show.
It's unilateral permission given to the creators. It's a really interesting transition and perspective. Thank you for sharing that, Nicholas.
Let me just add on. So before Viral Nation, I was at Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. So I'm from the platform side, and what they always were doing was looking at the audience. I'm going to go back to humanity. Like, so when Facebook back in 2018 was thinking, for example, about the stories format, they were just seeing that kind of consumption. That's what people wanted. People wanted kind of more ephemeral content was one aspect of that. You know, I think we talked a lot here, but like content is becoming much more short form, much more video. There's, I think, indications around society and attention span. So a lot of it is listening to people, like seeing what they think about. And in the movie context, I think it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. How can the movies continue to evolve, whether it's shorter, whether it's different engagement methods, whether it's distribution or more brand ambassadors on social? And, you know, I think the best movies or creators are ones that can like pretty quickly test, or platforms pump out a lot of tests and like really be open-minded to kind of undercutting their own business model and thinking about what they can learn about what their audience wants.
Here's a question. Do you feel like, so you know back in the day, like Justin Bieber would be in a film and like you'd see that film and you'd be like, oh God, like it felt uncomfortable or like inauthentic. Do you think that when you see, he was a great actor, by the way, in the films I saw him in, but do you think the same applies to sort of TikTokers in the movies? Do you feel that like it sort of adds an element of inauthenticity, I can't even say the word, inauthenticity to the film by putting a social star in it, for example, because that it's not, you know, you have these actors who are like there for a true craft and they've been working towards it, and then obviously studios come along and like, let's put this TikTok sensation into this film. Like, do you feel it ruins the film or like?
Okay, so here's what I think on this. So glad you asked that. I look at Kai Cenat and Kevin Hart.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if you guys look at their content, but it's such an interesting symbiosis where, okay, Kai needs Kevin because Kevin has more of a traditional movie star
credibility
vibe and kind of legitimizes him. And then Kevin, who I think in the traditional sense probably has more market power, is very astute in understanding that Kai is the bridge to the next audience, kind of to new formats, to live stream. Relevancy, cultural integration. I actually am, my guess is that he's learning so much from those live streams, from the comments, where you can still learn a lot about authentic consumer beliefs and behavior, and he's transitioning that into his comedy, into his movies. So yes, there's a little inauthenticity as you expand the lines, but like I do think that there's something in kind of like the people that are on the front edge of all these industries and like watching them and why they're making the moves they are, and that's one where I think is really, really smart for both parties.
I want to push back a little bit on the premise insofar as I think oftentimes we talk about creators like they're this like new species, right? And like that they're sort of homogenous in essence. I think creators are just like any group of people. Like there are good creators, there are not so fun creators, right? There are creators who are great actors, there are creators who are not so great actors. I think that There are creators who are tremendously talented, actors, writers, filmmakers, and we've seen that come into fruition. And there are creators who've been in movies just based on their follower count that did not perform so well as actors, and everything in the middle, right? But to the point that you made around Justin Bieber, when Justin Bieber and Shawn Mendes first came onto the scene, people were like, they're not legitimate. They didn't come up through the true, tried and true ways. They were just digital creators, right? On YouTube, on Vine. And now they are the biggest international superstars, bar none, right? Globally. I think people often have this tendency to look at anybody coming out of new channels and new spaces that challenge the establishment way of thinking and saying that you weren't meant to be here. But if you look at the reality, right? Zendaya started on Disney Channel, right? And Shawn Mendes and Justin Bieber started on Vine and YouTube. And today we have Addison Rae, who started as a TikToker, is a legitimate pop star.
And she's
we have Troye
talented.
Sivan, who started on YouTube, right, being an amazing actor and an amazing singer and pop star. And so I think that there's, again, this permeability, and I think good talent and good stories can come from anywhere. And what social has, there's a lot of perverse things about social, which I'm happy to get into, but what social has done on the benefit is democratize access to the microphone and democratize access to the platform, so it isn't the same three people who get to gatekeep who gets to be seen as legitimate and cool and interesting, and instead we, the people, get to be like, wait, actually, Veronica from TikTok is so funny, and hell yeah, I'm glad she's on SNL, right? And I think that's an exciting evolution as to giving people more opportunity to make it without having to credential themselves inside of institutions that have historically gatekept so much access from so many marginalized communities.
Thank you for this. This is a very lively debate here in a good way, and I think there's a lot of synergy in the sort of bigger picture thinking. But I'd love to turn this to sort of like the green light of tomorrow, and really ahead of doing a sort of lightning round, I want to just quickly go through the panel, make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. So, Mike, I'm going to hit you up first here, but getting visionary for a minute. 2030, you're green lighting a project. What does your content strategy look like? What are you, how are you designing for all the platforms and, optimizing and taking advantage of all these different ways to reach a global community and engage them?
Yeah, I mean, I addressed it earlier. I think micro-narratives are a legitimate way that we're going to distribute content in the future. I don't know that I would change the way I approach, as the director me, the way I make a film. I don't think I would try to do the cliffhanger, because then it ceases to work as a 2-hour experience. I'm an auteur, want to be, stay true to the film thing. So me personally, I'm not that excited about trying to make 1-minute narratives, because I don't think you can get that deep if the story has to move that quickly. But
91-minute experiences is not the same as one 90-minute experience.
yeah, I mean, my struggle is in the indie film market, right? So how do we monetize that market? And I do think social media does allow us to reach. That's where the young audience is, and that's where we want to reach them. So we have to embrace the form. But I wouldn't change my approach to the writing or development. I do think, for instance, we just greenlit a lacrosse movie. That's a niche audience that we know is there, and we know we're going to reach them on social media. We don't have to play to China in an indie film to make it, because we can make the film for $1.2 or $2 million and probably break even pretty easily if we hit that market hard with social. So niche stories in the indie community, hitting underserved audiences, that's what I would focus on. The other thing I'm hearing, and I teach a class at SVA just so I know, I can hear what young people are thinking about. The authenticity word comes up in every class. They want people to shoot on 16 again. They don't want to know anything about AI. So I do think you're gonna see very doc-like filmmaking happen in the future. Very small crews, very authentic, no makeup, no big lighting, using natural light. I think that's where indie film is heading. For anyone out there in indie film, I think you should be able to make a film for $50,000 right now. And that's okay, because that's going to be accepted. People are going to appreciate that you didn't have all of the bells and whistles of a Hollywood movie, but you're doing something that's more truthful and more personal, and that's going to be appreciated as well. Even more so in the world of AI slop. And I'll just say this, we're going to go into AI, I'm sure, because I have an AI division now as well. I think AI films are their own art form, just like Pixar came along and was its own art form. I'm seeing AI shorts, and I'm going to see some AI features very soon. They can be really beautiful. I think that's a whole nother lane for indie filmmakers that have big imaginations And they should absolutely make the next Star Wars in AI in a basement and do it for no money, and it's going to be incredible. I have a guy making a film right now that I think is the next Blade Runner, and it's all AI, and it's incredible. Yeah.
So bringing that human perspective, but tapping all the latest and greatest technology and platforms.
For sure, yeah.
Love it. Barry, I'm going to turn to you. Creating IP in the future, what is it that's going to be essential to remember for all the storytellers in the audience?
Storytelling, I think, is always essential, and it's sort of. But I think the way the stories are told might even change. Sort of touching on what you were talking about a second ago, I think, and people's attention spans, traditionally, a story is like a beginning, middle, and end, and that's how you tell a story. And I think more and more now we're sort of seeing stories told in micro that, but doesn't quite finish, and they have to jump onto the next part to get the next part of the story. But this is even going another step when it's coming to music now. So music is also changing because people's attention spans. So so songs, used to have a long build up to them, and now it's immediately songs being created that grab your attention straight away, so you don't switch off. So yeah, I think it's storytelling is always should always be the front and center of everything. But I just think the way those stories are told will change.
Thank you for that, Nicholas.
Yeah, I think there's two buckets in my opinion. There's kind of the intrinsic and the extrinsic. I think the intrinsic is really, an artist has something inside them that is a spark that they have to get out to the world. It's actually not me. I'm more of the suit. I have a little creativity, but from the more extrinsic and kind of what I do at work, I think it's, again, back to the audience. It's the consumer, and there's kind of two buckets to that too. It's really staying on the cutting edge, like this panel. Being at these kind of things, understanding what's newest in AI is obviously a very recent trend, but the whole value chain, production, creativity, testing, innovation, storyboarding, all these different things, and kind of what by 2030 can you really get out on a very, very small thing to test, and if you want to make something more of a commercial success that meets the needs of your audience, what they're looking for creativity or storytelling, that's where I think the best companies will play.
I love that. Ziad, please tell us, green lighting.
Yeah, well, look, I think that oftentimes there's this perception that Gen Z's attention span is non-existent, right? And that we only can consume content in these really quick, short bursts. Whereas when I look at culture today, the reality is the biggest, zeitgeisty moments in the last year are things like Love Island, which is an hour-long episode that comes out every single day for 6 weeks.
37 of them, right?
Yeah, is that right? And that's an incredible amount of content and attention, right? You talk about The Sun Right Turned Pretty, and you talk about Taylor Swift, who's coming out with a 20-plus song album every year, right? And there isn't a lack of interest or passion or ability on behalf of younger consumers to tap in and lock in across longer time periods and across longer medium formats. And so I am not of the opinion that long form, that traditional forms of artistic creation are going away, right? To the contrary, I believe that people are really itching for connection, and it is movies like Barbie, where you go with all your friends wearing pink that create a cultural conversation that everyone can participate in that I think are tremendously valuable right now. I think, though, it is the properties that have understood the power of digital to be a halo on top of that, or as a part of that have integrated the two into each other, that have been the most successful. Love Island creates some of the biggest creators, right, that we now consume, and people clip that endlessly on TikTok, and the fan edits create a powerful engine of consumption for the show. And so I think that what Greenlight looks like is not just thinking about Greenlight Power as just a studio for theater. It's thinking about how do I tell a story and make it live across, right? And so thinking about it in a fundamentally different way, but I would never minimize, I think, the power of long form. And personally speaking, when I think about where we are as a society, right, and being here at a film festival, I think about the pandemic and what a key moment it was for Gen Z specifically. And our data and the research that we did for our client Visco at the time told us that the vast majority of people were turning to creativity to get through the moment, right? Most people wrote poetry or drew or played music, maybe for the first time in years. But in moments of crisis, in moments of transition, I think we are all humans, artists at our core. I am deeply concerned about a world where it is harder and harder to make an honest living as an artist, where technology is putting creativity more and more at the margin, right? I'm interested in, of course, technology being additive, right? Insofar as creating efficiencies and creating opportunities for more of us to be involved. But I am really hopeful that perhaps we can band together as a society to protect and to invest in the arts and creativity in a moment when I think community and storytelling and world building are more important than ever before.
Just a quick anecdote on short form versus long form. Like I work in branded, so I work in sort of like I tell stories, but in the commercial space. We were working with a client who remained nameless the other day, and they were literally like, "So we need to create an entire like short form series around various products." And we were like, "Oh, okay, great. Like, so what are you thinking? You're thinking like a minute for each story?" And they're like, "No, dude, that's long form. Short form, like short form's 15 seconds. So like we're basically we had to like basically tell these stories within 15 seconds of everything. So it's just like the insanity in which we find ourselves in various situations now."
Just 1 second.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
1 second to tell the story.
Adidas.
Barry, you're trolling me ahead of my lightning round here because I'm going to give you guys 3 words. So 3 words or 30 seconds to answer. But can we name one creator under 25 who's pointing toward the future of storytelling? Nicholas.
3 words. Did you say?
3 words or 30 seconds for each of these answers.
Okay.
But yes.
I'd say Kabi Lame. He's number 1 on TikTok. That's why I think that.
Mine
And I
as
think
well.
with respect to storytelling, he's taken a unique spin. He doesn't talk. So there's no words. It's all kind of miming and visuals, and that's what speaks to me.
Keith Lee, YouTube.
We've had Carl Shakur at our studio a bunch, and I'm just blown away by the production, the visual quality he gets as a one-man band with a DSLR, and what he's doing in post with his work is just amazing to me.
Thank you.
I actually don't know how old he is, but I mentioned overcompensating, so I think Benny Drama has to be my answer.
Excellent. I love it. Can we talk about one film or a television show? And Love Island's ruled out now because we already from the last, let's say, 2 years that cracked the code on social integration.
Barbie. I just think, if you say Barbie, I'm guessing in many of your minds, the color pink comes to mind. And I do think a lot of that distillation to the audience was based on social.
I was going to say Mr. Beast games, but I think I was going to go for the OG one, so I gave the Squid Games because that was everywhere at the time.
The indie guy here, I'm gonna go with a doc called Listers that did not do any traditional route. It just put the movie on YouTube and asked people to donate, and they've already raised over $500,000 just through donations on YouTube of people that
Amazing.
love the film and just wanted the support. And I saw $500.
Wow.
And the effort is not pay me because we watch this, but pay us so we can make another film. You like what we're doing? Pay us so we can we're going to use the money to make the next one. I thought that approach was brilliant.
Terrific.
It's called The Listers, by the way. It's about bird watching. It's a fascinating little talk.
Yes.
I mentioned The Summer I Turned Pretty, which I think has done this really effectively, but I also want to give Tubi their a fair shake. Because I think Tubi is doing some really extraordinary things as it relates to democratizing access to television and including a lot of creators in their content and developing stories around them in a really exciting and fun way. And I think an example of a creator who's transitioned to an actor and did a great job is Noah Beck. I think that unexpectedly that movie did great numbers and was a really great rom-com. I properly enjoyed it. And I think is making a lot of people have to challenge their own preconceived notions as it relates to what studios and what talent get to be good, right? Because Tubi is a new kid on the block that I think is increasingly having to be taken seriously because they're making a lot of smart bets in social, in creator, and on storytelling that other folks are still unwilling to.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you,
Yeah.
Ziad, for a second. So what's a traditional format that's ready for reinvention? So thinking movie trailers, pilot episodes, press junkets, things that are kind of locked in the past that we need to turn the page on.
Okay, well, on the press junkets phones, I'd have to give a shout out to one of them days with Kiki Palmer, Issa Rae, and SZA, because that press junket was my favorite thing ever, and I think they did such a phenomenal job, and I think both that and Wicked has demonstrated the power of new media and podcasts as a way for people to even be aware that something is happening, and I'm really excited about that transition and how a lot of increasingly artists like Riz Ahmed and otherwise are getting really involved who are more traditional talent in the new media ecosystem. But on an area that I think is ripe for reinvention, we're in a theater today, I think the movie theater is one of the most like the areas that come to mind, top of mind for me, that are necessary for reinvention, I think a lot about how when you scroll on TikTok, I would say like 50 to maybe 60 to 70% of the entertainment value is actually the comments as opposed to the content itself. Right? We click on the comments before we've done finished watching the video. To the point around that Nick made around like following the consumer behavior, like the movie theater and the traditional industry need to learn from that consumer behavior.
Yeah.
So like Netflix watch partying was tremendously successful during the pandemic, but we actually haven't figured out, none of the platforms and or movie theater experiences, how do we replicate that experience in traditional formats? I want a world where in the movie theater, everyone in the theater is entered into one group chat. And we're all live texting about the movie that we're watching. That actually adds to my experience, not detracts from my experience. It doesn't have to be every showing and every movie, but there are certainly experiences in which that could be additive and add to the cultural conversation. I think there hasn't really been reinvention as it relates to also copywriting. Like this idea that we shouldn't have our phones out during the movie. The best marketing channel for most of the properties that we're talking about, Love Island or otherwise, are people who creating unlicensed, right, unregulated fan edits of the content, and that's what's driving people back to actually watch the real content. And an embrace of UGC as a legitimate marketing channel and funnel, I think is essential for the longevity of the industry that we're in.
Mike?
You took mine with the comment, like Netflix should have a feed where you can see the comments as you watch the show. So I'll do my second one, which is AMC now offers a thing where you pay a monthly fee, almost like a subscription model for movie theaters. And I think the art house theaters need to do the same thing. My students are complaining that that's the only way they can afford to go to see 20 movies a month. So why isn't the Angelica doing something similar? So I think the art house and the indie theatrical community has to get into the subscription model. Criterion and Mubi should also get into brick and mortar because that builds community when people go in person and have conversations about the films. I don't know why they're not doing it. But
Super sub between AMC and Criterion. Let's predict it here. Barry?
I think yeah. Just very quickly for me, I think maybe movie trailers. I find that I generally watch a lot more movies now as a result of TikTok. So like I'm scrolling through TikTok and I'll be served like once upon like a clip, a scene, like a lifted scene from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I'm like, oh god, when did I last see that? I need to go and watch that. So I find myself like watching that night. So like I find that the approach, instead of going like whiz bang like sizzles around films, I think we can maybe, which is funny, going back to Zad's point about people's attention spans. I'll sit there and I'll watch like a section of a movie for like 3 minutes, and then that night I'll be like, oh, I'm now prepared mentally to like sit here and watch this film for 3 hours. So yeah, I think lots to unpick there.
I'll just piggyback on that. My last film, I put the trailer out and it didn't really catch on. I put scenes out with the subtitles on, and they went ballistic. So people were more interested in sharing a particular scene than they were with the trailer.
Actual clips, not behind the scenes, but actual clips. That's fascinating.
I'm also going to say trailers.
Okay.
Show of hands from the audience. Who prefers the trailers to the movie? Anyone? Okay. I'm 50-50, but I'm someone who always goes for the trailers. And I just think two things. One, that's a normal marketing service we do right now at Viral Nation, TV cut down. So you bring a TV commercial, and then our job in our studio is to cut it down for social. So I think it's like a very social first concept and analog to the movies, creation of the trailer. And second, I think it's an intersection with the AI trend that doesn't completely distort the human creativity, which can still exist in the movie, but like I could see AI increasingly be used to kind of cut it down for each individual consumer, for each personalized view. So maybe one cut down of a 2-hour movie is very suspenseful and one's very like energetic and action-packed. And over time, that's kind of an AI use case that preserves human creativity.
Thank you. In the spirit of preserving human creativity, I want to say if we can give us one optimistic hot take in 3 words or 30 seconds on where entertainment is headed. So in 10 years, the biggest storytelling innovation will be?
Yeah, I think in an era of AI, like real human storytelling is more important than ever, to the point that you were making, the more stripped back. I think people are craving like what couldn't have been AI? Like what had to be human? And I think that we're gonna see more and more of that, this like raw, unfiltered storytelling that challenges us to be even more human.
We're as a soundstage business as well, we're betting on a hybrid model where you have real actors doing some of the acting and AI doing some of the lifting. So we're building a volume wall on one of our stages so we can do the close-ups with humans, but the really big expensive money shots we'll do with AI. So Hey, the head of my AI division, Rob, what are you calling the hybrid model? Hybrid reality production. That's what we're banking on.
Fascinating. Thank
catchy.
you.
Yeah, I was going to echo what Ziad said. Is like, I think I watched a film recently, I'm sure you've all seen it, Civil War, A24. And it's almost like, when I watched it, it was shot like very documentary style. It felt very human, felt very raw. And at the time I was like, you know, because I work in branded content, and this is going to be longer than 30 seconds, I'm sorry. But like, you know, AI can do mass very well. It can churn out mass like very well. So like it can eat my lunch very quickly. But I don't think what it can do currently is like just tell those real raw human stories. And like Civil War was that. It's a story about, you know, journalists during Civil War in America, and it's just like a very like compelling, impactful film. And I just don't, you know, I think that would be the future. So.
Nicholas, want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I like the optimism, first of all. I'm very optimistic. I'm going to say choose your own adventure. If anyone remembers those books from the 90s, that again kind of elicit consumer participation and kind of driving of the storyline, but preserve some of the art. So that's my hope for where we can get to in the future.
I tried that 10 years ago, and I had to shoot 172 minutes for a 22-minute short film to be interactive. It didn't click then, but we didn't have the phones.
You're ahead of your time.
I do hope it comes back. It's really fun.
Well, please join me in thanking these amazing panelists. These are great.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.